Lesson 812, Spinning, Flipping, and Sliding, Naming Transformations. In this lesson, I want you to know the difference between translations, reflections, and rotations. And before watching this recording, work through the Desmos activity for this lesson and complete as much as you can. You won't be able to finish the first slide, which requires a partner in class. Now that you've finished looking at that Desmos activity, let's take a few notes. We're on page 6 in your notebook. And our learning goal is to understand the difference between three words, between translations, reflections, and rotations. We're talking about figures moving on a piece of paper here. Translations, reflections, rotations. Those were the three things that you saw in the activity in Desmos if you went through that already. There are three phrases that describe movements that we have been exploring more precisely. Instead of using slide or flip or turn, we're going to be using these words. And these are some descriptions of translations, rotations, and reflections. Let's see if we can match them up. First of all, we have something where we move every point to a point directly on the opposite side of a line, as if you're flipping it over a line. We'll see one of these down here in an example in a moment. But if you're flipping something over a line, that's a reflection. We'll call that A. So that's the definition of a reflection, and we're looking for flipping something over on the opposite side of a line. Our second description, B, is something that moves every point around a center by an angle in a specific direction. Wow, that's a lot going on. But if there's some center point that you're moving around, that's a rotation. And finally, if you're moving every point in a figure a given distance in a given direction, that's a translation. So let's take a look at an example of some of these things. Now, in class, I introduced this transparent paper as a tool that we can use for understanding the movement of these figures a little bit better. So I'm going to introduce what I'm calling in class patty paper. Let me scooch up just a little bit. We're going to look at one example of each of these things: translations, reflections, and rotations. And you don't have to write this first direction here, but start by drawing this shaded figure onto the patty paper. In fact, I don't think I'm going to write that that's what you're doing. I think you get the idea. Let me just scooch up a little. So I've got my transparent paper, and I'm going to call this like a little bunny shape. I'm seeing like an ear on top, and his nose is facing here to the right. Kind of an abstract bunny. But I am just sketching this little bunny. And then I'm asking myself, what am I doing to the paper to move this bunny from the shaded area onto this empty area? Let's take a look. I'm just going to move it so that this figure fits right on top of that one. There. All I did was I slid it like maybe an inch to the right. Let me pull this off. So when we just slide something over, that's a translation. You'll notice that I didn't change the way my bunny was facing. He was facing to the right, and he's still facing to the right. Okay, I can move up, down, left, right, but as long as I don't move or change the direction that my little bunny is facing, that's a translation. So we just slid to the right about 1 inch. In our last lesson, we were getting away with saying slide, but we need to move on to this word instead, translation. Let's take a look at this next one. I've got my same little bunny. And I'm going to ask myself again, what do I need to do to this transparent paper so that I can fit this right on top of that? Well, if I just slide it, that's not going to work. And I might even be tempted to turn it around, but you can see that doesn't quite work either. What I have to do is really physically pick this paper up and flip it over to get that original figure to sit on top of the other one. And if I have to pick the paper up and flip it over, that's called a reflection. Let me see. So, and I'm going to go back to our definition from up here. It moves every point to a point directly on the opposite side of a line. So I just want to draw this line for you that we flipped over. I know what you're thinking. You're asking yourself right now, Mrs. Tuitt, where can I get a Tinkerbell ruler? I think you have to have kids before you can pull it off. All right, so there's that line of reflection. And I'm going to take my Tinkerbell ruler, line it up with that line of reflection, and kind of fold this paper over right along that line. And I think you'll see that that little bunny, see if I did it well. I did not do it well. That's not the best line of reflection. But the little bunny should land right on top on the other side of that line. So there's my line of reflection. Okay. That line could be a horizontal line, it could be a vertical line, but there's some line that acts as a mirror to those two figures. So that just leaves us one more here. The only one we've not talked about is rotation. I'm going to go ahead and write that down now. But let me show you how you can use this patty paper one last time. I'm going to line up my bunny. Here we go. And I'm asking myself, what can I do to move it from here to here? Well, flipping it over actually won't work. I know you're tempted to. I'll flip it over to show you. It doesn't quite do it. That bunny's facing the wrong way. And obviously I can't just slide it like I did with the translation. That won't get it on top of the figure. What I need to do is a rotation. And a rotation is where I have some center point that I'm going to spin around. And in this case, that center, let me get a pencil so I could use this to pivot with. I'm going to sit it right at this center. And all I'm going to do is take this transparent paper. I'm going to hold my pencil tight onto the paper, and I'm just going to spin this transparent paper. It's just going to pivot right where my pencil tip is. And if I found the center correctly, I was a little bit off with the center, then I can rotate that bunny so it sits right on top of the other figure. Let's see if I can do better rotating it back. That's a little better. I think my center of rotation is still a little bit off, but you get the idea. So rotation is where I have some center that acts as a pivot point, and I'm turning around. Now, I could turn to the left, I could turn to the right, but you would usually have some direction saying, hey, turn it 180 degrees or 90 degrees. And it could be clockwise or counterclockwise. So these are the three words we want you to start using: translation, reflection, and rotation. And I'm going to refer to that patty paper, that transparent paper, as we finish up with these summary questions, saying, how can you tell the difference between a reflection, a translation, and a rotation? Well, translations aren't too bad. Let me start with that. When you translate something and you think about this patty paper, or this transparent paper, you don't change the way the shape is facing. You can make it go up, down, left, or right, but you always have your figure facing the same way. Translation doesn't change the way a shape is the direction that a shape is facing. Honestly, I think reflections and rotations are harder to tell apart sometimes. But if you think about this patty paper, or you use this patty paper, Here's what you can notice that lets you know it's a reflection or a rotation. Again, you're asking yourself, what do you have to do to the paper to move the original figure to the new figure? And for a reflection, you have to physically pick up and flip the paper over. Up here in our example, to get this figure to sit on top of that one, I had to pick the paper up and flip it over. If you have to take the paper off of the desk, then it's a reflection. To flip it over. Reflection is the only one where you have to pick the paper up. And that leaves a rotation. You don't have to pick the paper up. It just looks like you've turned something around. So when I rotated this, I spun the paper around, but I never had to pick it up. Don't have to pick up the paper. Just turn it. So our goal in this lesson was just to elevate your vocabulary a little bit and move you away from saying turn, flip, and slide, and instead saying translate, reflect, and rotate. And hopefully this transparent paper has helped you to understand what kind of movement we're dealing with based on whether we're picking the paper up and the direction the figure is facing to begin with and to end with. You should be ready to complete the practice assignment now. Have fun.